Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that cuts through the noise to get you well informed on the topics that matter. Today, we're diving into a challenge as old as humanity itself. How do we feed ourselves? But in a world grappling with climate change, population growth, and, evolving technologies, the answers are anything but simple. Our focus today is Kenya. It's a really fascinating case study right at the heart of a global debate. It's a place where modern biotechnology, specifically genetically modified organisms or GMOs, stands in, well, stark contrast to traditional agroecology. This deep dive will unpack the layers of policy, science, and those deeply held societal perspectives in Kenya directly from the sources you've shared with us. Our mission is to help you gain clarity, maybe find those aha moments about this incredibly complex issue. It's one that has far-reaching implications for food security, honestly, everywhere. So get ready to be well informed on a topic that's not just about science, it's also about sovereignty, community, and the very foundation of how people feed themselves. Okay, let's start by setting the scene a bit. Kenya faces some really pressing challenges when it comes to feeding its people. We're talking persistent droughts, which are just devastating for agriculture, right? And maize yields, they're shockingly low, far below what other countries achieve globally. And all this contributes to food price inflation, pushing over 10 million people into hunger. It's a pretty dire situation.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this challenging backdrop is precisely why the debate around biotechnology and agroecology is so critical. You've got these two distinct approaches, often opposing, actually, both vying to address food security and agricultural sustainability in the country. Biotechnology proponents are suggesting engineered crops for higher yields, better resilience. Meanwhile, agroecology champions focus more on diversified farming, local knowledge, that sort of thing.
So the fundamental question becomes, can these paths converge? Or must Kenya, and perhaps other nations too, ultimately make a choice between them? Is it an either-or? Okay, let's delve into Kenya's legal journey with GMOs. You mentioned it's been quite a roller coaster, starting with a significant ban.
Yeah, Kenya formally banned GMOs way back in 2012. That set a clear boundary for, nearly a decade?
Exactly, a full decade of no GMOs allowed, legally speaking.
But then came this pivotal moment. October 2022, the cabinet lifted that ban, a big decision. It authorized importation and open cultivation of GM crops like boot maize and boot cotton. This was after technical reviews, international safety approvals, the whole process. Right, but the immediate legal pushback that followed was quite telling, wasn't it? Multiple petitions were filed. We're talking law firms, farmer groups, civil society organizations, all heading to court. Initially, the Environment and Land Court actually dismissed these petitions. That was in late 2023 and again in late 2024. They basically affirmed that, yes, due legal process had been followed by the government.
Okay, but here's where the story takes another sharp turn, right? Because despite those dismissals, on March 7th, 2025, just recently, the Court of Appeal issued what they called a status quo conservatory order. Now, this order explicitly blocks any further implementation of that cabinet decision. So no more importation, no more regulatory steps related to GM crops, at least not until the final appeal outcomes are decided. It's like they hit the pause button hard.
Exactly. And that ruling, it really underscores the widespread unease among various groups. It highlights this strong call for, robust legal safeguards and much more transparent public engagement. It's also important to note, though, that before this injunction, the National Biosafety Authority, the NBA, had actually started to act. They'd begun mandating formal registration for anyone rearing GMOs using their eCitizen and NBA portals, and they were starting public consultative processes. So it suggests the government was trying to establish a framework. But clearly, the court felt maybe it wasn't enough or wasn't done correctly to satisfy all of the concerns raised.
So moving from these policy battles, let's talk about the actual crops, the specific technologies at the center of this debate. What are we actually talking about here? Well, Kenya has already approved a couple of key GMO crops, butt cotton, for instance, that's been commercialized since 2020, and Brett maize was approved back in 2022. Though, as I understand it, it's still waiting for a variety release committee review, so not quite out in the fields yet.
That's right. And beyond those, there are several other important crops at various stages. Trials, confined release, that sort of thing. We're talking virus-resistant cassava, which is huge for food security. There's also work on vitamin A-enhanced cassava, looking at nutritional benefits, plus drought-tolerant maize, obviously critical with the climate issues, and late blight-resistant potato. The scale of research is pretty significant. As of 2023, the NBA had approved, I think, 58 projects, ranging from contained lab work to confined field trials, and even 3 for environmental release. So a lot happening behind the scenes.
Okay, now let's explore the arguments from the other side. The proponents of biotechnology. What are the projected benefits? Why do advocates believe GMOs are, well, essential for Kenya's food security? The economic potential is often front and center, isn't it? There was a report in November 2024. It estimated Kenya had already lost around, what was it, 157 million US dollars just due to delays in adopting blood cotton, blood maize, and that light-resistant potato. And flipping that around, the potential benefits if they adopt these GM crops projected over 30 years, it could be substantial. Something like USD 467 million.
Yeah, those figures really highlight the stark economic choice Kenya seems to be facing. It's the known cost of inaction versus these projected gains. Gains that are, however, deeply tangled up with all the social and political hurdles we're discussing. For example, that beet maize, if it had been adopted earlier, say by 2024, some estimates suggest it could have increased Kenya's maize output significantly. We're talking potentially around 194,000 tons more maize. Now, put that in perspective. That's about 25% of Kenya's total maize imports in 2022. And it's something like 14 times the amount of UN food aid provided that same year. I mean, that's a potentially massive difference for a country facing hunger.
Wow. And it's not just about yields and money, is it? The arguments also cover environmental and health impacts. Breed crops, for instance. They're designed to reduce pesticide use, right? Especially against common pests like stem borers and that notorious fall armyworm. That seems like a clear win-win. Benefits for human health, less chemical exposure, and better for the broader ecosystem, too.
Absolutely. And proponents argue that increased yields from GMOs could also lessen the pressure for agricultural expansion, maybe help slow deforestation, potentially even cut Kenya's CO2 emissions. And critically, especially in a climate-stressed region like Kenya, certain drought-tolerant GMOs are reported to need less water, maybe 25% less. That's incredibly appealing for rain-fed farming systems. The big hurdle there, of course, is infrastructure. Irrigation is still very limited, covering less than 2% of the land. So drought tolerance only helps so much if the rains fail completely and there's no irrigation backup.
Right. So while those potential benefits are clear, it's absolutely crucial we acknowledge the other side, the equally powerful concerns fueling the opposition. What are the primary worries leveled against GMOs? Well, one area is health. There are these lingering scientific uncertainties, people say, regarding long-term health effects. Critics point specifically to potential issues like allergenicity or the effects of chronic exposure to these new proteins in the crops. They argue that the testing periods for GMO approvals might just be too short to really understand these long-term impacts.
That's a key point. And then there's the issue of herbicides. Many GMOs are engineered for herbicide tolerance, often specifically paired with glyphosate. Now, international agencies have linked glyphosate to probable cancer risk, and critics also highlight its potential negative effects on soil microbes, potential water contamination, and definite harm to vital pollinators like bees. So the concern moves beyond just the crop itself to the whole agricultural system associated with it.
And then there's the environmental angle of gene flow, sometimes called genetic pollution, right? This happens through cross-pollination with indigenous traditional varieties. And the fear is that this could threaten local biodiversity, disrupt the ecological balance, and critically undermine seed sovereignty. That fundamental right of farmers to save, use, and exchange their own seeds independent of corporations.
Exactly. And that leads straight into the socioeconomic concerns, which are maybe even deeper for many opponents. See, most Kenyan smallholder farmers rely heavily on these informal seed systems. They save seeds, they share seeds. It's how it's worked for generations. GMO seeds, on the other hand, are often patented. They have to be bought new each year. This model could fundamentally undermine farmer control. It creates increased dependency on multinational corporations. And many argue it erodes that traditional seed-saving culture, which is more than just practical. It's, culturally significant.
Yeah, you hear that strongly from groups like BIBA Kenya, the Kenya Peasants League, and others. They emphasize that lifting the GMO ban without really strong safeguard mechanisms in place, well, it compromises food sovereignty. It compromises legal rights related to food quality, the right to know what's in your food, and general consumer protection. And layered on top of all this is public perception and awareness, which seems mixed at best. Awareness about GMOs is apparently quite low generally, and misinformation seems widespread. You mentioned surveys showing a split.
That's right. Around 57% of Kenyans saying they're unwilling to consume GMOs, but 43% are willing. But digging deeper, that willingness often seems driven more by acute food insecurity in eating food, any food, rather than a fully informed choice about the technology itself. Even among young people, you see this divided view reflected.
Okay, so this is clearly a complex landscape with strong voices on all sides. Let's try to map out who the key players are. What are their specific motivations, their concerns? Let's start with civil society and the agroecology movements. You have leading groups like the Seed Savers Network, which is part of the Kenya Biodiversity Coalition, KBIOC. That's a big alliance, over 60 civil society groups. Their focus is really championing farmer-led seed sovereignty, biodiversity, agroecology. They do things like host dozens of seed fairs every year, places where farmers can exchange traditional, indigenous, often climate-resilient seeds. And they advocate strongly for legal recognition of these farmer-managed seed systems.
Definitely. And then there's PELUM Kenya. They're a national network of NGOs and farmer groups. And they play a really central role in implementing Kenya's 2022 National Agroecology Strategy. Their work involves capacity building, organizing dialogues at the county level, coordinating policy efforts under that strategy. They host national forums where people are calling for bans on harmful agricultural inputs, defending that constitutional right to safe, nutritious food.
And you see it bubble up at the local level, too, like Maringa County adopting its own Agroecology Act back in 2022, even hosting an international conference on it. And there are youth voices making an impact. Like Mary Muthoni Wangari, leading Haki Nawiri Afrika, they're focused on empowering rural youth and women, specifically through agroecology education, aiming to reach, what, 250,000 farmers with climate resilience programs? It's impressive grassroots work.
It is. And these local efforts get amplified by broader alliances. Groups like the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, PASS-JY, and the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, AFSA. They connect Kenyan stakeholders with wider advocacy across the continent, emphasizing environmental justice, indigenous seed rights, pushing agroecological policy agendas. For them, seed sovereignty isn't just about farming. They frame it as a critical form of resistance to what they call neocolonial control. It's about self-determination through agroecology and valuing indigenous knowledge.
And alongside them, you have groups like Greenpeace Africa, BIBA Kenya, again, the Kenya Peasants League. They are very outspoken in their strong opposition to GMOs, full stop. They cite inadequate public consultation before the ban was lifted, the ecological risks we've discussed, and clear threats to those vital indigenous seed systems. Anne Mena, the coordinator at BIBA, put it very powerfully, she said. Introduction of GMOs threatens the farmer's seed sovereignty. GMO seeds are patented and will benefit multinational seed manufacturers only. So it's no surprise they strongly welcomed that March 7th court ruling putting things on hold. Okay, so that's one side. Now, let's look at the other side of this conversation, the biotech advocacy groups and the research institutions. Who are they and what are their main arguments? Well, a key international player with a base in Nairobi is ISAAA, the International Service for the Acquisition of Agri-Biotech Applications. Their AfriCenter serves as a regional hub for biotech capacity building information sharing.
That's right. I actively promotes biotechnology as a tool, a way to improve crop resilience against pests and diseases, boost yields, even enhance nutrition. They engage quite heavily with policymakers, researchers trying to shape biosafety frameworks. Margaret Karembu, the director there, often argues that fears linking GMOs to things like cancer are based on misinformation. She strongly advocates for expert-led science communication to clarify safety and, dispel those myths.
And then domestically, you have Kenya's own agricultural research institutions, like KALRO, the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, and labs at various Kenyan universities. They're the ones actually conducting many of the confined trials we mentioned for peat maize, cassava, other biotech crops. They aren't corporate entities themselves, but they provide that crucial scientific voice, supporting safe trialing procedures, demonstrating the efficacy or lack thereof of these technologies, and they often participate in county-level sensitization efforts, sometimes alongside groups like QBECO, the Kenya University Biotechnology Consortium.
Yeah, and we've actually heard from some county officials, for instance, up in the North Rift region. They've specifically urged groups like KBECO to set up demonstration plots. The idea is simple. Let farmers see the boom maize technology firsthand. Let them observe it, ask questions, and make their own informed decisions based on what they actually witness, especially regarding benefits like pest reduction. It's about showing, not just telling.
Makes sense. And finally, let's touch again on the general public sentiment. We said it's mixed. You hear it in youth voices, too. Some expressing fear about losing control over seeds, worried about higher costs, the dominance of big corporations.
Exactly. And those concerns often get amplified by perceptions, rightly or wrongly, of dominance by foreign philanthropies and corporations in this space. It raises fundamental questions around agency, around technology sovereignty for Kenya. But on the other hand, you absolutely have Kenyans who argue that, look, with proper science communication, with the right context, GMOs are simply an accelerated, more precise form of the crop improvement humans have been doing for centuries. It really highlights the massive challenge of communicating complex science in a way that builds public trust and respects deeply held values. It's not easy.
Which brings us, I think, to the ultimate question for Kenya, the one hovering over this whole deep dive. Do they need GMOs? Proponents point directly to those persistent food security challenges we started with. The alarmingly low yields, especially in staple crops like maize, the rising hunger across the country. For them, these are clear indicators that new solutions are desperately needed, and GMOs are a powerful tool in the toolbox.
But the critics push back hard. They insist that agroecological approaches offer sustainable and effective alternatives. Things like organic farming, diversifying crops, focusing on improving soil health naturally, strengthening those community seed systems. And the fact that Kenya launched its national agroecology strategy just last November in 2024 is a really significant signal. It shows this alternative path is gaining serious national traction. It's being considered a viable way forward, maybe even the preferred way by some.
It's also important to remember Kenya does have a legal framework, the Biosafety Act. It allows for multi-agency risk assessments. It mandates public participation. The framework seems to draw from both U.S. and EU models, trying to strike a balance, perhaps, combining precaution with a more pragmatic risk evaluation.
Yes, and what's truly illuminating there, I think, is a clause Kenya included recently. It basically clarifies that just because there isn't full scientific consensus on a risk, that doesn't automatically mean the risk is acceptable. Now, that reflects perhaps a more moderate stance than the EU's very strict precaution-first principle. It suggests Kenya is trying to find its own way. But ultimately, yes, Kenya stands at this pivotal crossroads. And that ongoing March 2025 court order, it really reflects the widespread unease. It underscores how absolutely vital it is for any path forward, whichever way it goes, to involve robust legal safeguards, genuinely transparent public engagement, and clear alignment with Kenya's deeply held food sovereignty values.
Wow. Okay, what a deep dive this has truly been. We've unpacked so much, the projected economic gains, the potential yield increases from GMOs, but we've also explored the really critical concerns, health, environmental impact, and especially that fundamental issue of seed sovereignty. We've seen how the courts, civil society, scientists, everyone is weighing in on this profound debate.
It's so clear, isn't it? This isn't just a scientific discussion about genes and crops. It's deeply, deeply intertwined with farmer rights, with traditional practices, with national autonomy. And that March 2025 Court of Appeal order, it just highlights how absolutely crucial legal safeguards and public trust are in navigating any path forward for Kenya's agricultural future. There's no moving forward without addressing those.
So what does this all mean for you listening in? I think it's about understanding that grand solutions to these huge complex problems, they almost always involve incredibly nuanced conversations and really difficult choices. There are just no easy answers when something as fundamental as feeding a nation is at stake.
Indeed. And it points towards the need, perhaps, for a truly balanced agricultural strategy for Kenya. One that, yes, protects farmers' rights and seed sovereignty, but also rigorously monitors health and environmental impacts, whatever technologies are used. A strategy that supports agroecological methods, supports local innovation, and crucially strengthens that vital background infrastructure irrigation, storage, farmer extension services. You need the whole system to work.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. As Kenya navigates this complex path, what can we learn? What can we all learn about how any society grapples with technological innovation, especially when it intersects so directly with deeply held values of tradition, autonomy, and the very foundation of how we feed ourselves? Think about that. Keep exploring these topics, analyze the information critically, and consider how these debates might resonate or even be playing out in your own context.